different types of gradient blends that I showed you in class today. All right, and I would remind you that the lecture that is posted in week 7 has every single type of blend mode. Everything I showed you in class and a couple that I didn't have time to show you in class are here in this lecture. So feel free to check that out. This is the worksheet that's also in the content folder. Okay, so let's look at the first one. The first one is object blend options. And I'm just going to show you where this is. Now, if you've already been blending colors, then you're fine. If you've been blending shapes with your object blend tool, you need to reset the tool. Let me show you what I mean. I didn't even get to this in class. Let's do this as a little optional extra. Here's a circle, an orange square, and a yellow circle. If I go to Object, Blend, Blend Options, and I say specified steps, let's say 4 steps, all right? And then I grab both of these objects and I come to blend and I say make. So not only is it changing the color, it's also changing the shape. Do you see that? That's fine. But for right now, we're just going to talk about color. So we go to Object, Blend, Blend Options, Smooth Color is what we want. We want the machine to create a smooth color. And then we grab both of these items. I'm using my solid arrow. I'm going to grab both of them. I go to Object, Blend, Make. And it extrapolates. It says this is yellow, this is orange. Here is the smoothest blend I can make between yellow and orange. And if I take my hollow arrow tool, my direct selection tool, and I click on this inner circle, you see that I can move the highlight wherever I want it to go. All right, that's the object blend options. That is the blend tool. All right. So let's go to the next version. The next version uses the gradient window. I'm going to go to Window, Gradient. I'm going to do about 6 or 7 things with this gradient window. So we have 3 different types of gradient. And if you hover over them, you can see a linear gradient, a radial gradient, and a freeform gradient. The linear gradient, if I come in here, I can choose these preset gradients. So this represents the gradient. You see this? This is the gradient slider. When you hover over it, you can see. These are the color stops. And if I have this box selected and I play with the color stops, you can see that I can change the gradient. If I grab this gradient, the color stop, and I pull, I can remove it from the gradient slider, and you can see that the gradient has become a little less complicated than it was a minute ago. You can have as many color stops in your gradient as you would like. Now, let's see how to change color in the gradient slider. A couple different ways to do it. I'm going to go get my swatches, and I'm going to open them up, and I'm going to put them here. Now, as I mentioned in class, if you want to make life easy for yourself and you're creating a gradient, I would make little boxes of all of my colors and put them up here. I would create a palette. You can do it that way. If you take a minute to kind of plan out your gradient, it's much faster and simpler than just clicking around in the swatch menu. But if you're determined to click around in the swatch menu, I could come over here and click on this color stop, and then I could, whoops, hang on. I did it wrong. If I double click, excuse me, I can come over here. I can come over here now. See what I'm doing? I'm loading in, but you got to double click. Sorry. Double click. So I can choose, this is my swatch menu. I can come over here to the swatch menu if I want to look at them by their names. I can custom mix a color. These are CMYK colors. I can create something custom. I can, if I had created a little palette up here, like some of you were doing in class, I could use my eyedropper tool to sample that color off of anything else that's in the document. I can just move around and use that. So you can create, and then up here, the little handles determine how hard or how extreme the gradient becomes. Let me take some of these out. If I want a nice smooth gradient, I'm going to put that marker in the middle of the color stop. If I want something a little more extreme, I'm going to move the markers to the edges right next to the color stops. And you can see I'm creating some interesting effects. The other thing to bear in mind, this is a linear gradient, so it's moving in a straight line. I can grab it and edit it this way instead of editing it over here. I can also change, see, I can make it 45 degrees. I can make it 150 degrees. The only thing that is a given is that it has to go in a straight line. All right, that is the linear gradient tool. The radial gradient tool, as the name implies, the same standards apply to the gradient slider, but the gradient moves now from the center out from, it moves in a circle is basically all it is. And again, if I grab this edge and I start moving it around, I can change all kinds of things. I can make it look like a lens flare. I can edit the color stops. I can add more colors to the color stop. I can do whatever I want to the gradient. All right? It's a round gradient. It's a radial gradient. Should have been working down here, sorry. If I come over here with my eyedropper tool, I can just pick up the same gradient. And then if I come in here, I'm gonna go get this. See the gradient tool? If I click on it here in the toolbox, I get the gradient bar again, and I can go in and change it. All right, we did all of this in class. Those are the first two. The last one is the freeform gradient tool. So I'm going to skip over strokes for a second. Here's the freeform gradient tool. So two different ways to do freeform gradients. In class, we worked mostly with lines. So if I click on the freeform gradient tool, you notice it picks up the last freeform gradient that I worked on. Freeform gradient. So these are the color stops. Before, the color stops went, I'm going to go points first. The color stops were in a straight line or in a circle. Now the color stops can be anywhere I want them to be. And again, if I double click, I can go in and choose any color I like. It's going to be much easier for you to do this if you add the colors you need. Either you can see I made a little a palette up here, or add them to your swatch menu so that you're not mixing colors on the fly. It's just it's just like best practice to do it that way. If I want a new color stop, I just click. See the little plus sign on my cursor? It's saying, yeah, that's fine. I'll put in as many as you want. And when you put in a new color stop, it's always the same color as the last color stop you put in. If I want to delete a color stop, I put my finger on the option key. Oops, hang on. Oh, sorry. I don't put my finger on the option key. I apologize. You just pull it. The same way that you pull a color stop off. Sorry, it's kind of late. The same way that you pull a color stop off the linear gradient or the radial gradient, you just pull them out. And that way you can edit them. All right? The other way to do this, I'm working in points. If I pull all of these out, you notice I only have one color stop, so it turns solid. If instead of that I do lines, it's like a mini pen tool, and now I can lay things down, and the color stops have kind of more of a relationship with each other. And so if I say, okay, I want the top to kind of bow out, so I'll make that lighter. And I want the middle to kind of bow in. And then I can move this stuff around. See that? And I can create a kind of curvature in the heart as I'm doing this. And then there it is. All right, that is a freeform gradient. You can play around with these hearts if you like to. And the last one I'll show you here, you can do gradients on strokes. This is a stroke. It's a very thick stroke. I think you can see that. If I go to my stroke menu, it's a 40-point stroke. Let me see the options. All right. So, yes, thank you, phone. If I go to linear grade, whoops, okay, don't make this mistake. This is filling, and I want it to stroke. So I'm going to undo. I want the stroke to be highlighted. Now I'm going to fill it with a gradient. So there are 3 kinds of stroke gradients. They're right here. You have to start on linear, and then you can do within, you can do along, where it's running along the length of the stroke. You can see this is where the gradient starts, and this is where it ends. You see how there's a hard line there? And then there's one that's called across. And the across one can be kind of cool if you want to create something that looks like it's white in the middle or lighter in the middle. See that? So you can get some really interesting effects with this gradient tool. But just be aware that you're putting the gradient not in the fill, you're putting it on the stroke. Gotta kind of pay attention to that. And then if I put these two, so these 2 stroke circles have the same gradient. If I come in here and turn one of them upside down, see how almost immediately we get this 3-dimensional look? Because your brain is just so used to the idea that light stuff comes up and dark stuff's moved down that it immediately creates this kind of punched out look. So you can play with these. Remember, it has to be a linear gradient, and then you can play with these. All right, those are the 3 we did in class. I don't usually do this, but the mesh that I did the demo on, I have a video done by somebody else. This woman is the most amazing person with the mesh tool I've ever seen in my life. And so I'd like you to look at hers. So I will put that link in the Slack channel. All right. So take these gradients and make me some shapes for homework. I don't think that this will take you very long. Let me know if you have questions.